Noble Gold. Real assets. Real value. Your wealth protected.
Well, it's a very special privilege for me today. I've got Dr. Rashid Buttar, who was one of the first guests that I ever wanted to have on my show back in April, May of 2020. And I've had to wait 3 years to get it. But it's a real pleasure to see you, Rashid.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Thank you so much.
Your videos at the start of this journey, because the first part of this journey was the virus, or whatever they wanted to call it. And my first part of the journey was to encourage people to build their immune system and to protect themselves. And you were a person that was out there giving genuinely good advice, which is completely polar opposite to what the government was telling us to do. And the one thing with what you were telling people, for a simple lad like me, was it made sense. What you said makes sense. And that's one thing with the truth, isn't it? It makes sense. And what we've been told made no sense at all. And for you as a doctor, to see people walking around with these paper masks on, I mean, a doctor will wear them in surgery because that's common sense. But seeing people over here in Spain in 30 degrees, 40 degrees of sunshine, walking along the seafront and even swimming in a mask, it made no sense.
Yeah, that's the one thing, like you said, the truth resonates at a frequency that is very, very palpable, and people feel it, right? It's not whether you know it or you don't know it, you feel it, you feel truth. And I had all sorts of people that were sending me messages when we exploded on social media and saying that, my voice rang the truth. People said they saw light behind me, all sorts of weird things that people saying. And I'd go back and watch these videos and I can't see any light and I can't hear any, I'm like, I don't know what they were talking about, but I think it's that resonance of truth that they were referring to. And I agree with you 100%.
No, I totally agree. And that even comes into personal life with my relationship with my wife. It wasn't the type of woman I'd normally go for, but there was something inside her. There was something that resonated, that vibrated with me. And we now know, after 11 years together, what that is, that we're on the same frequency. So when people are tuned in at the right frequency to understand truth, it's very easy to listen to somebody like you because you speak the truth. But when you listen to a politician who lies, you sit there and go, really? Really? So you were a light at the start of this journey for me. And it's a real pleasure for me to be able to talk to you about what's happened because of your expertise in the medical field.
Well, I appreciate that. And, the thing for me that was the most irritating was that I'm not an expert in infectious disease. I'm not an expert in epidemiology. And so I thought that somebody, this foolishness, some doctor's going to speak up because I need another controversy, like I need a hole in my head. I've been fighting the medical boards pretty much every single year. I had some kind of case pending with the medical boards. I fought the FDA. So I'm thinking this absurdity, nobody's going to tolerate that, and somebody's going to speak up about it. Because again, I'm not an expert in infectious disease. My specialty is trauma and emergency medicine, and I was trained in general surgery. So I'm waiting, and nothing's happening. Literally, nobody's talking about it. And so, I see in February, my own staff are freaking out and they're getting paranoid. And I went to give one of my managers a hug, and he's my closest friend. And I go to this and he's like, no. And I realized, my God, this is like, you people really have no idea. So on my Instagram, which I had maybe 200 people, literally 200 people, I put a message. I put down, if you really want to know the truth about COVID, just say yes. And if I have enough people that say yes, then I'll make a video. That's all I said, Charlie. So I had 200 people. I figured if half the people, 100 people said yes, I would make a video. Next morning I check and I have 700 people then saying yes, although I only had 200 subscribers. My subscribers had already jumped to 900. And so that's when I started putting out the COVID-19 controversy or conspiracy video series. And it was six or seven videos. And that's what led to everything kind of blowing up. And in fact, I had on my YouTube channel, I only had maybe 200 people, 300 people, and then a past employee had created the channel for me. And so I didn't even know what the login information was. We couldn't even log in videos. So we had to start a new YouTube channel, and that's the one that just exploded and just went, catastrophic, just straight parabolic line up.
Yeah. Well, look, for me, it's such a privilege because 3 years ago, there was only you, me, and I think there was a guy called Dr. Shiva as well that was out there as well. There was a handful of people. And obviously the godfather is somebody like David Icke, who was telling us 40 years ago this was going to happen.
Right. That's right.
And we, at the beginning of 2020, we were sort of lone voices out there, just talking about what we knew. But the momentum grew very quickly. And I don't think the deep state, the cabal, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, ever guessed that this would happen, because they've always had control of big pharma, big tech, and everything else. But there was a huge momentum shift where people were listening to people like you and I. That doesn't mean that everybody agreed with us, but what it did was it provoked them to start looking. And that's all I ever wanted to do. Have a look. And if you disagree with me, brilliant. Come on my show and let's discuss it, and let's try and establish what the truth is. That's all I want to do.
And that's exactly, what you just said. It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because when the YouTube stats started climbing up like crazy, and I had Patrick Bet David, I had London Real, what's his name?
Yes. Brian
Rose.
Yes.
All these people actually asked me to, they said they were going to do these interviews. They did these interviews, and I warned them. I said, look, you don't want to have, you probably, if you have a video with me, it's going to get shut down. And they were like, no, don't worry about it. It's never been. I've had mafia bosses. I've had these people, that people. Nobody's ever taken on our videos. I was Brian Rose's first one that got taken off. Actually, in his case, David Icke was the first one. And then he launched his Freedom Network, and if you look at them, they're all numbered. So 001, the first interview he ever put on was me, and then David Icke was the second one, which then broke all the records. And David's a friend of mine too, and like you said, he was the grandfather of it all. But what was really interesting was the comments. I would read all the comments, and when it was 500, 1,000 comments, it wasn't a big deal. But then when it became 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 40,000, 50,000, I would be up at 6, 7 in the morning, and I've only gone through like the first 700 comments. And finally, my significant other told me, she goes, you can't be reading this stuff. And I was like, but people are asking questions. And she goes, but you there's not enough time in the world to do this. And as she's saying this, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. As she's saying this, I see this comment. It was the last comment I ever read. It was from a guy by the name of Tom. I don't know who he was, but it was such beautiful advice. He says, Dr. Buttar, you look tired in your last video, so get some rest. And then the next thing he goes, remember that you can lead a dumbass to water, but you can't make them think.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a great comment. And that was the last comment I read, and I never read any more after that.
Sure. No, I think we're all right at the start. I read the comments right at the start, and my ego came up, and then I got a bad one. Oh, I felt terrible. And that was the last one I read, when somebody started saying, you're talking absolute rubbish about it was about the vaccine, actually. And people said, you need to be encouraging people to have it, and you can't stop people having it. And I said, I don't want to stop anybody. I just want them to be informed so they can make an educated judgment on it. That's all. And
that's all we can do.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a person that has never had one, and I am actually probably the only person in the world that will openly admit that I am anti-vaccine, because of the fact that I've never had one, and I don't have any allergies, and I've never had COVID, and I've never worn a mask. I've depended 100% on my immune system. And for anybody who knows me, I've abused my immune system like I should never have done in my life. There's no reason I should still be here with the amount of alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs in the past that I've been involved in. And yet, I haven't had a drink of alcohol or cigarette now for 218 days. I haven't had any form of illegal substance for 4 or 5 years. And my body's in reasonably good shape. It was a struggle for the last 4 days playing golf at a charity event for 4 days of golf. That was a struggle. My body's not as fit as it was. But that's because I'm 62 years old, 63 this year. You have to know your limitations.
Right. Right.
But I'm a lot
totally
better
agree
than
with
I
you.
would be.
Well, Charlie, it's a common thing that I've probably been the straightest shot arrow that you can imagine. I've never drank alcohol. I've never smoked. I've never done anything. But
Are you Trump's illegitimate son?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Are you Trump's illegitimate son?
Well, I know that he's always said not to drink, and he told his kids that. I had a brief conversation with one of his sons, with Eric, and that's what I heard, that his father's always promoted. But what's interesting is that when this whole thing started, I put the challenge out that I will go anywhere in the world, wherever there's COVID, as long as they paid for the trip. And I said, and as long as they let me take my, little bag of my own pills and potions, vitamins and supplements and whatever. And I said, I will go anywhere in the world where there's an infection. I will hug the people. I will shake the hands. And if she's good looking enough, I'll even kiss her, which actually I got a slap for that. But I said, that's how not worried I am about COVID. And it was what the amazing thing for me was that more doctors didn't speak up. Nobody was speaking. No doctor spoke up. I mean, there were some, like you said, there were a handful of people that started talking, but there was no medical, scientific people that had credentials that could come out and say something. And I was really pissed off at that nobody else was. And here's what was the funniest thing, that there were three doctors that were really on YouTube, really coming against me hard, saying that, talking about my fights with the medical board and talking about that I wasn't this, I wasn't that, and just coming up and saying that I was irresponsible, I was going to contribute to people dying, just like CNN tried to say. Now, what's funny is those three doctors are today dead because they took the vaccine. Right. The third one, you don't hear from him talking about vaccines anymore. But two of those people were the detractors. The biggest detractors were dead. And they publicly talked about them taking the vaccine. In fact, one of them was an OBGYN from Florida. And his wife put in a comment towards his obituary. I think it was a comment that she made after the obituary came out. And she said, my husband was young. He was like in his early 50s, was young, healthy, took the vaccine, and developed blood clots, was in the ICU and died within 2 weeks of taking the shot. And she said, please be informed. That was the whole thing. And that, what you said, that's all you want to do is inform people. That's all my goal was, that people be informed. I've said over and over and over again that, look, I served in the U.S. military. I was part of the 2nd Infantry Division. I was part of the 101st Air Assault Division. I was attached to the 5th Special Forces Group. I've taken my life potentially and put it on risk to allow people to be as stupid as they want, to ensure the freedom of people to be as stupid as they want. You want to get a vaccine, go get a vaccine. But the problem for me is when they start to step on my toes or on the toes of my loved ones and start to impose their narrow viewpoint and insist and mandate vaccines. That's where I have an issue, right? So it's the way I used to say it was a lot more entertaining. And I said, I've put my life on risk to ensure your freedom to be as stupid as you want to be. But that doesn't mean that you can now start imposing your stupidity on me. And so I think that's been everybody's message, people like you and I that value freedom and want to ensure freedom and we don't want to insist that anybody not get vaccinated, get vaccines. But you know what? There's so much censorship going on. And we know that historically, those that have censored have been on the wrong side of history. And those who have been the victims of censorship, and I don't want to use the word victim, but those who have suffered censorship, where they've been censored, they're always on the right side of history. And so I think that says enough.
It does. When I was doing the shows with Mel Kay, she was the person that we managed to establish and find out that COVID stood for Certification of Vaccination Identification. 19 was AI. And we also found out that it was patented in 2015 at the Pirbright Institute in Surrey, which Pirbright happens to be Rothschild's middle name. So first of all, sorry?
I didn't know that, because I put that information out about the Pirbright, and that's Pirbright Corporation is controlled by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but I didn't know that was Rothschild's middle name. I didn't know that.
That's correct. So when
Did you know that?
Go on.
Did you know that that patent was perfected in November of 2019? Because it was
Correct.
They applied for it in 2014, 2015, but it perfected in November, and the next month was the first case of.
When they put the patent together in Pirbright, we followed the paper trail, we followed everything. They started to produce it in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which we're now all aware of. But that's when the twist in the tail comes, is where do you think it was mass produced?
Well, I know that the initial research was done at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Yeah. And then when the U.S. government passed the moratorium, that was actually the subject of that interview that I did in 2020. When the U.S. government finally passed the moratorium on chimeric research in 2014, after the outcry by the virologists throughout the world, after that, that's when Fauci diverted the funds to Wuhan to continue that research. But I'm not sure where it was mass developed, probably somewhere in the U.S.
No, it wasn't. It was mass produced in the Ukraine.
In the Ukraine, which would explain this current war.
That explains 36 bioweapons factories. And also what they started doing in Ukraine when everybody was looking at Wuhan. So it wasn't there. So they didn't mind people looking at Wuhan because it had all been moved to Ukraine by then.
Wow.
You suddenly realize that everything is in plain sight. We didn't know.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
Well, it's interesting that even the PCR testing, and you look at, Kerry Mullis, who I met in the early 2000s at a conference, was very outspoken about Fauci and also about the fact that his PCR test, which he won a Nobel Peace Prize for, as you know, that research was developed. The test was not developed to pick up an infectious pathology, but rather just to pick up a signature. And so that all was, he had actually openly challenged Fauci to come to the University of South Carolina for a debate, but Fauci never did. And he did not have any kind words for Fauci. Now, it's interesting that Kerry died in August of 2019. Something happened in September. I know in October was Event 201, which was a mock pandemic, which was all to do with coronavirus. Yep. And then November was a perfection of the patent that was filed by Pirbright. And then December was the first case of coronavirus. So you can see the sequence of events is very organized. They had to wait till Mullis died, or I don't know whether he died of some nefarious cause or not, but they had to wait till he died so he couldn't refute the utilization of the test, how they misbranded it and how they bastardized his actual technology to promote and propagate this agenda. But the whole fact that August, September, October, November, December, 5 months sequentially, critical things happened, and everything was launched in December, the first case of the virus in Wuhan. So, those types of things, you can't make that stuff up, right? Truth is stranger than fiction.
It is. And the one thing that's strengthened my case with my audience is I told people it was going to happen before it happened. So when I was called a conspiracy theorist, they didn't call me what they like. That was one of the nicest things they called me. I suffered bullying at school. So being called a conspiracy theorist is almost like a badge of honor.
Exactly. Well, I was going to say that is a badge of honor. If you look up my Wikipedia page, it says a British-born U.S. physician conspiracy theorist. That's what they've got me down.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's incredible.
Charlie, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between a conspiracy theorist? No. What's the difference between a conspiracy and actual news?
6 months.
Yeah, I've heard about 18 months.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so true, though, isn't it? It's so true. What I was telling people 3 years ago about the shutting down of the world's economy for a global financial reset, I openly admitted in July of 2020 that I'd found out that there were two resets in play: the Great Reset, which is Klaus Schwab and his New World Order agenda, and the quantum financial system. And there's so many different terminologies that are so similar. You've got to be right on guard to see what is what. How they were going to shut down the world's economy, I had no idea. But we're now seeing it. We're seeing the complete collapse of the US dollar, the collapse of the economy. I was the first person to publish it. It was at a Clay Clark event in October last year that the quantum financial system had gone live, and BRICS were actually using it. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were already using it. And people were going, well, America's not using it, so it doesn't count. I went, well, with respect, India has 1.5 billion people. China has 1.5 billion people, and Africa as a continent has 1.5 billion people. And I said, if South Africa's doing it, you can bet your life the rest of Africa will hop on board in a hurry because they've got assets to back their currency. So it's all happening now. It's been difficult for me to differentiate between who's on the good side and the bad side, because like in life, Rashid, Satan makes things look better than the real thing. And I always use the example of a cleavage. If you're walking along the seafront with your wife and a cleavage walks towards you, your eyes just go. Doesn't matter how good a man you are, you have to bring yourself back. And this is how Satan works. It's made to look super attractive. And the men out there realize that what I'm saying. And so do the women.
Unless there's one counterpoint to that. Because there may be some men that won't look, but it's not because the natural instinct isn't look there. It's that they're worried and they've been trained that if they look, they're going to get a punch to the head. So that's one caveat.
That's very, very true. That's very, very true. Some wives, including my own, have got a very tight grip on me, and I don't mind that at all. I don't mind that at all. But this is how this whole thing is done. It's been made to look something it's not. Sorry.
Well, I was going to ask you about this. So, with the BRICS nations and the U.S. world, the U.S. dollar being the world's reserve currency and being affectionately referred to as a petrodollar in certain countries, and of course, I'm being facetious about that. But the invasion of Libya is a beautiful example of this. So,
yes.
Gaddafi was considered to be one of the most dangerous people in the world. In fact, during the Iran-Contra affairs hearings back in the 1980s. I was in 1983, 1984, 85 timeframe. I can't remember when it was, but I was in college during those years. And I remember a senator asking Colonel Oliver North, who was at that time active duty, asked him, would you not agree that Gaddafi is the most dangerous man in the world? And Colonel Oliver North said, no, Senator, I would not. And the senator was very shocked and asked, who do you think is the most dangerous man? And that's the first time I heard the name Osama bin Laden. Now, Osama bin Laden, people think, he was responsible for 9/11. He openly said that I don't know who did 9/11, but he also said, I'm glad that they did it because the Americans deserved to be taught that lesson. But Osama bin Laden back then was considered, in the 80s, was considered to be the most dangerous man by the U.S. military, at least. And it wasn't for the reason that people thought. It was not because he was a terrorist, but because he was extremely, extremely wealthy, and he was extremely, extremely principled. And so when he left Saudi Arabia to fight the jihad in Afghanistan, he was actually fighting the Russians originally. But when the Russians bugged out, who replaced them? We did. The U.S. replaced them. And so Osama bin Laden was dangerous because we, the CIA in the United States, had actually trained him. And then when the U.S. became the oppressors and replaced Russia, then Osama bin Laden, he didn't have any loyalty to the U.S. or to Russia. He only had loyalty to the people that were oppressed, i.e. the Afghanis. And so that's why he turned the tables on the U.S. And the reason they said he was the most dangerous man was because he knew all the training tactics and everything else about the CIA, because the CIA had supported him and backed him against Russia. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is back then they're talking about Gaddafi being the most dangerous, and then Colonel Oliver North straightening it all out. Now, this most dangerous man, Gaddafi, that many people thought was the most dangerous man, comes to the United Nations every year and addresses the United Nations. But he's the most dangerous person, right? He comes every year, all throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, no problems. Then he comes to the United Nations and he talks to the United Nations and addresses the other African nations and says, why are we still backing the petrodollar?
Mhm.
We should be supporting our own currencies by relying on gold. So he was pushing for a gold reserve evaluation and getting off the US, what he called the petrodollar. In New York, the most dangerous man. What happened? All of a sudden, within like 4 months, we invade Libya because he was threatening the US dollar's world reserve currency status. That's why that's why we went in and took him out. All the other years, for 40 years, we never did anything, even though he was the most dangerous person, right? And now he comes into the United States, but we never did anything. But as soon as he threatened the US dollar, that's when we took him out. And that was, of course, reported by Russia at times. No news coverage was of that issue, that history for the United States. No media covered it, but Russia at times covered it, and that's the only reason I learned about it. So it's interesting how we, when I say we, I'm talking about the United States, have, created these issues, and the world doesn't really know. I mean, we, the United States, are the largest terrorist organization in the world. We, the United States, have committed more atrocities on other nations' foreign soil, sovereign soil, than any other nation. We're the only nation that has over 760 bases on other nations' sovereign soil. I mean, how would we feel if there was some other nation that had a base on our soil and took a crap on that soil every morning? Well, guess what? That's why I've heard politicians say, so-and-so, this country hates Americans. Why? Because Americans love freedom. And I'm like, really? People actually buy this BS? The guy that was running against Obama from Pennsylvania, I can't remember his name, senator, started with an S, would talk all the time about the other side, people in the other parts of the world, how they hated Americans because Americans loved freedom. I'm like, no, they also love freedom. That's why they hate Americans, because we crap on their soil every single day. So this entire propaganda machine trying to tell Americans that we are the greatest, which, we are a great nation, but then we have all these things that we believe in. We believe in sovereignty and we believe in freedom, and everybody else hates us because we love freedom. No, they love freedom too, and we're oppressing the freedom, and that's why they hate us. And so I think that this whole thing with the currency, I think it was only a matter of time, and I believe the only reason this didn't happen earlier was because the largest holder of US dollars was China. Now, I know from 2011 to 2019 that was the case. I don't know if it's still the case or not, but I think now we're seeing exactly what you were talking about.
Well, I had the privilege of meeting Osama bin Laden many years ago, and I can tell you that he was one of the nicest men I've ever met. He was 6'6" tall, very, very quiet, very, very humble. You look at Libya before America invaded. It was an amazing country. The educational system was outstanding. The schooling system was outstanding, and America went in and destroyed everything that they had. I
mean, the types of things you're talking about, people don't know that farmers got land for free. Electricity was like literally pennies on the dollars. Nobody went hungry. Bread, for example, you could buy a loaf of bread for the equivalent of 1 cent. Education was, I believe, wasn't education free too? Like college?
Yeah, education's free.
Yeah.
And petrol is 3 cents a litre, 3 cents a gallon.
Wow. And they went in there to smash the country. I mean, I'm sure he did some things that were bad and people talked about, but look, before you start to throw rocks at a glass house, right? Be careful what you do, because we have done a lot of atrocities in our nation. And historically, we go back and, my lab partner used to say, he who controls the narrative dictates history.
Correct.
And so we have really controlled the narrative all along. Cowboys and Indians, the Indians were bad and cowboys were good. And it's not till 200 years later we know the atrocities that Custer committed against men, women, and children of the Native American tradition. So there's all this stuff that people don't know. There's a total different part of history that hasn't been taught.
And if you take Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, they make Osama bin Laden look like a choir boy by comparison with the atrocities that they've committed all over the world. And the one thing that we will find, and I'm looking forward to, is the truth coming out, because when you listen to so many lies for so long, you just don't know what to believe. And one thing I've been saying, Rashid, is when people say, well, who do I trust, Charlie? I said, this is where you need to go within. You need to learn to trust yourself. God gave you intuition. He gave you common sense. We need to get back to those where you go in, go within and see what you feel. Our feelings have been dumbed out of us. I'm just grateful for my journey, being born and brought up in a religious cult. So I experienced brainwashing, indoctrination for the first 23 years of my life. So I understand it. I used to argue that black was white when I was a kid with anyone not in my church, because in my bubble, we all believed the same thing. And the mainstream media are in that bubble. They believe the same thing. The medical profession are in the bubble. They believe it. I learned with the medical profession because I did a lot of study, having watched you early on, as to what level that the Rockefellers managed to fund, because they funded, I think, $8 billion into the medical profession to continue their narrative. And it was right at the very, very top, because I spoke to 4 or 5 levels of doctors who hadn't been bought. They'd just been told by their peers above them that this is what they had to do. And they didn't question it. There was a number of them. There was the female doctor in Germany who disagreed with what she'd been told, and she actually administered 6,800 placebos rather than the COVID jab, because she got taken to court and she won in Germany. So there are a number of doctors that have done the right thing and have stood up, but there's a lot of doctors. One Scandinavian doctor that I know in his 30s said, Charlie, when you're a young doctor trying to make a way in the medical profession, you do listen to your elders. And I said, that makes sense to me. It makes sense. But you also have to trust your intuition.
Without a doubt, Charlie, without a doubt. I think that's the biggest thing that's lacking in mankind is the thought that's been indoctrinated that you need an intermediary between yourself and the creator to communicate. And, when people tell me, I used to tell patients, God talks, I used to talk about God talking to people. And people would say to me, well, God doesn't talk to me. And I'm like, God talks to us all. The problem is we're making too much noise and we're not listening. That intuition, that sixth sense, that gut feeling that we get, that is the creator. That's the universal consciousness, that source energy, whatever you want to call it, that's communicating with us. And I just very recently, in December of this past year, 5 months ago, had a journey where I know this is going to sound crazy, probably won't sound crazy to your audience, because they know that, you've done a great job by bringing in all sorts of other thought processes. And so people now realize that the truth is stranger than fiction. But I literally had a conversation with God that was 2 hours. Well, it was a number of hours, but the first 2 hours and 35 minutes of it was recorded. And I was aware of everything that was going on. But it was a journey. I call it a journey because there was some plant medicines, not ayahuasca or anything like that, but there was some plant medicines that were taken. And like I said, I was completely aware. I could ask for water. I did have an eye mask on, and I had headphones on to basically reduce any outside information or distractions, if you will, with noise and sound. But the first hour and 5 minutes of that whole conversation, Charlie, was nothing but, oh my God, I see you, God. And I was asking for help, and I literally had conversations, and a lot of it I don't remember, and they recorded it because they knew that I wouldn't remember a lot of it. But what I thought was 4 or 5 minutes was 2 hours and 35 minutes. Wow. And I can tell you that the universal message that I got over and over before, there was like a premonition during my experience, and then afterwards, was that mankind needs to exercise free will, right? And that free will is when people are manipulated by something, it's because they're not listening to their heart, that communication that we're talking about. Because when you listen to that, that is the inner guidance that tells you what is right and what's wrong. And when we are given the free will, when God has given us the free will, and we decide to go into the side that's fear motivated, that's not exercising free will. When you take a vaccine because, the only way I can go on this cruise is if I take this vaccine, that's not free will. You're not exercising free will. Exercising free will is knowing that what you're doing is not based on love for yourself or love for other people. You're just taking the least resistant way, and that's not exercising free will. It's standing up and and fighting for the rights of those that are weaker or not as strong as yourself, that's exercising free will, standing up for what's right. And we all know what's right and wrong inside us, right? There's that when people say, well, this is a gray zone, there's no gray zone. We all know inside our hearts what's right and what's wrong. To steal is wrong, but to steal to feed a starving child is right. To kill is wrong, but to kill to defend your family, that's right. There's no gray zone there. And this is a gray zone that's been dumbed down, and people saying you need to have a Malvi or an imam or a rabbi or a priest or a minister or a preacher to be able to connect with God. No, you don't, because those people are just as flawed as the rest of us. And so I can't agree with you more wholeheartedly that we need to trust within. We need to trust that instinct, that guide, that intuitiveness that we have, that everyone has, that tells us when we're right and when we're wrong. And if people did that, I think the world would be a much better place.
It would. And it's not just hearing voices in your head. I've heard many people, well, I've never heard God talk to me. It's not like hearing voices in your head. He guides you through certain pathways. He blocks you on certain ways, puts obstacles in your way to stop you going a certain way, rather than hearing him talk to you in your head and hearing funny noises in your head. It's not like that. God has a very gracious way of having his arm around you and guiding you down certain paths and leading you to certain people like you and me together. He made me wait 3 years to get to you. And he had a reason for that. And sometimes we'll never know that reason, but God's timing is always spot on. And
100%.
My audience, Rashid was one of the first people I ever wanted on my show, because I resonated with everything he said. And it took virtually 3 years, but I'm so grateful. We were talking earlier that you were promoting something.
Yes, the conference. But before we talk about it, Charlie, can I ask you a couple of things that you mentioned to me that I'm intrigued by, and I think that I haven't talked to anybody about these subjects, but you brought up a number of things that you. Yeah, so I don't know whether it's okay with you, because I would like to talk about that. But
of course,
I've got certain opinions about that too, and I haven't had, I like to. Okay, so during that, one thing you said, God, it's not like hearing voices in your head, and I agree with you, because up until I'm in my mid to late 50s now, and up until December, I'd never heard God. Well, I take that back. I'd had one occurrence. It was a life and death situation. I actually did hear a voice that asked me a question. But other than that, I've never heard God talk to me. But I've been, like you said, it's almost like a warmth or something that guides me, right? It's that guide. And I think that's that intuition, the gut feeling, the sixth sense. That's God. That's how I've always interpreted God until this journey in December. And I asked God the question, like, he had such a sense of humor. And I even remember asking him, like, your sense of humor is like mine, God. Like, I didn't know you were so funny. And the Creator said to me, his answer was, I communicate with people in the way that they best receive my message, which was, totally made sense to me. And so I'm thinking, okay, so God's telling me I have a good sense of humor. Okay, well, maybe I don't have such a good sense of humor, and God's just imitating the same way so that I can understand what he's saying. And so if you speak French and that's the only language you speak, and you have a message from the Creator, you talk to the Creator, he's not going to be speaking to you in some type of Slavic language or Swahili, right? He's going to be speaking to you in a language that you can comprehend and understand. And that's what we have to understand as humans, that we will get communicated the way that we're going to best receive that, but we need to be open and receptive to those messages. And I believe that right now there are messages coming. There are a lot of messages. So I would like to turn the tables on you, Charlie. And you said that there was all these things that you knew, and you mentioned, and then you said something, the last one. And I haven't heard anybody else talking about that, but I have very, very specific belief systems and opinions on this. So I'd like to talk about that before we adjourn. So just in a nutshell, can you explain what the quantum financial system is? Because I've heard that, but I'm not quite sure I understand what that is.
Okay, the quantum financial system is a digital system which will be asset backed. So there's a lot of people out there talking about gold standard and gold backed. I used to use the term gold backed. And then I was corrected by the quantum team and said, no, Charlie, it's asset backed, because certain countries will be using gold, like America, like China, like Russia, like India. They have an abundance, like the whole of Africa. Most of Africa, I should say, not the whole of it, because Zimbabwe is going to use diamonds. And the United Kingdom is going back to sterling silver. So there'll be a combination of silver and gold in America. But the quantum financial system, and this is what I love about it, is first of all of the last week or the week before, the combination of two, 173 central banks failed in the last 10 days. But I knew that this was coming. But every country in the world currently has a gold bullion exchange bank in place to replace the central banks like the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, etc. So they have all been placed and they have all been loaded. They're ready to go. The system itself, BRICS are currently using the quantum financial system, a digital banking system. The mainstream media will try and convince you it's a central bank digital currency, which is their one, which is the critical difference between a CBDC and the quantum financial system is whether it's asset backed or not. And the Fed Now system that they're trying to promote, because they realize that we've cottoned on to them, so they're changing the name, is not asset backed. And they tried to say it was. And I said, well, show me the proof. Show me the gold. Show me the asset. Where is it? Is it fully asset backed, or is it a tiny asset backed, or what is it? So I've been now the official spokesperson now for how long? 2 years as the official spokesperson, maybe 2.5 years. The official 3 years. No, it's 3 years now. The official spokesperson for the QFS. It made it fairly difficult when I went under a military NDA because they controlled what I could and couldn't say. Beforehand, I could tell everybody what was happening. But the new digital system will allow me and you to be able to transact between each other without a bank. Be able to, very much like the crypto world, but a lot more simple. I get asked many times, is it blockchain? And I'm told it's DLT, which is 10 times faster or 100 times faster than blockchain and more secure. But it's the same, but the basics are the same. There will be, for a period of time, notes and coins. And when I was at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump at his place for dinner, I was met by a trumpet, a lady who runs the elder ladies that are supporters of Donald Trump. She pulled me on her table and she said, right, Charlie, I understand you're going to tell me about the QFS. All I want to know is what will I have in my wallet afterwards? And I thought that was beautiful. You know, that generation of people, a bit like myself, I find blockchain technology out of my pay grade. The younger generation get it very, very clearly. But the new system is fully operational, and there are now over 40 countries that have joined BRICS that are transacting between themselves without the Federal Reserve. And interestingly enough, Saudi Arabia has now detached itself from the US dollar. So the petrodollar will go to zero, or the US dollar will go to zero in a very short period of time. And that will happen overnight, where suddenly the world continues to move forward. I always thought when they were going to crash the world's economy that everybody would go down together. But it looks like God had a plan to have a safety net there, with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa already trading and already doing huge amounts of business. And probably the funniest piece of business right now, it's almost irony that Russia is selling crude oil to Saudi Arabia at a discount price to sell on to Germany, because they're not allowed to sell it directly to Germany because of the sanctions. This sort of stuff you can't even make up. Wow. And it's all being paid for in asset-backed, rubles backed by gold on the digital currency, and so is the Chinese yuan, backed by asset-backed on the digital system.
So when you say asset-backed, you said diamonds, gold, silver. What about other assets like real estate?
Any asset. It has to be physical assets. And I've just come back from 4 days charity golf in Ireland, and I've been winding them up that their asset is potatoes. But, for anybody who knows their history, but it will be asset backed, and of course, what it will do is it will turn Africa into God's country because they have an abundance of assets, and the same with South America. You know, Venezuela that has suffered immensely through corruption, whether political or cartels or whatever. And these people deserve to have it. And when people talk about people crossing over the border from Mexico, etc., 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 of course, once these countries get back their rightful assets, these people will go back in a hurry. These people don't come to America because they think it's better. They come because they want to provide food and quality of life for their families.
Mm-hmm.
So the minute they can do it in their own country, most people want to go back to their own country because that's where they grew up. It's in our DNA to go back there. So it'll be very interesting when these countries do start to see wealth like they've never seen before.
So the topic that I wanted to kind of delve into and that I have my specific thoughts on too is when you said the quantum, and people were questioning who is going to be backing that up, and then you told me before we started recording that you were told, don't worry, the
off planet.
Yeah, you said the comptrollers would be off planet. Is that what you said?
The compliance
would be off planet. So that's the topic that I really wanted to get in with you. So
but, yeah, this is one thing that makes me peaceful, because as we go into a world of abundance, there are people out there that money will destroy their lives, and you and I know people that money's destroyed their lives. But we also know people that money has made them a far better person. And this is where off-planet compliance comes in, because you don't have to turn to Charlie to make a judgment, and a compliance team that has certain financial benefits through doing certain things. When you're talking about off-planet compliance, it puts everything into God's hands. And I'm quite happy with that.
So am I. And I love that you said that, because it's very interesting. You know, your comment that you just made when you start talking about compliance off planet, and then you said, as we come into this world of abundance, and I apologize, Charlie, I have not followed you. I know of you, obviously. My significant other, Dr. Ashton's mom, has sent me clips or your postings, and actually I saw myself referenced in one of your clips. So of course, my ego, I was biased. I was like, well, I don't know Charlie Ward, but he must have a good, he's got a great sense of taste. You know, that was my own version of looking at it. But I have not heard anyone else talk about coming into a world of abundance till you just said it. Because I have been saying that all along, that as with any evolutionary process, growth is a characteristic, but growth can be very tumultuous, very painful, downright destructive. But it's necessary for us to get to the abundant new world where tolerance will be better accepted, where truth will be rewarded, and where we will be all in a state of abundance. Because that's what I feel. That's what I have felt for a long time. And so when you said that, that really was like music to my ears. And when you said off planet, right? So that's just okay. So I've got my opinion about this, but I think it's very presumptuous and very arrogant for humans to think that we are the only intelligent life form. In fact, I find it humorous that we would consider ourselves intelligent because of all the stupid things that we do. I mean, just look at the COVID nonsense. We are literally sheep. In fact, I think sheep would have, that term sheeples. Well, I think sheep would have a better sense of discernment than humans have had.
Yeah.
Like literally thinking that putting a mask on, not realizing that that's like building a split rail fence or a chain link fence to keep a mosquito out. It's impossible. But people just lose their minds and they become, they feed their stupidity and ignorance. And it's just mind boggling to me. That's the one thing that I have realized and has saddened me that mankind is this disillusioned and this gullible and this naive that this type of wool can be pulled over their eyes.
Mhm.
But let's talk about the aspect of other beings out there that are more evolved and what the proof is, because I want to share some things with you, but I want to hear what you have first.
But I think you've absolutely nailed it. The arrogance of humanity that thinks that there is not other life forms out there. But what it is when you live in a bubble. I lived in a bubble until I was 23 years old. When I came out of that bubble, I suddenly realized the world was a very different place to what I thought it was. And there are so many different things that now when you open up, the other thing that's interesting is when you and I start to talk about off-planet compliance or other beings out there or aliens or whatever, instead of people debating it with us on an adult level, they just laugh at you and go, oh, you're one of them. That rings alarm bells with me immediately. It was like when somebody asked me about is the world round or flat? I said, well, to me, it won't make any difference if it's round or flat. It won't make any difference. I'm very happy. But I said, the fact that NASA won't debate it with the flat earthers suggests that they're hiding something. I don't know what it is. But if you won't debate it, so I came up with the term, Rashid, that it's flound. It's neither round nor flat. And I've just sort of sat with it there. But one thing I do know is that they've lied to us about so many things. What I try and do is open myself up, and I'll let God do his work with me and guide me to where the truth is.
Well, Charlie, I think that's a perfect place actually to be, because I have learned some things as I've been on this planet, and some of those things are that things aren't always the way that they appear. And in my world, God is a God of love, of abundance. One of the things that I realized during this journey was I've heard the terms where people say God loves you more than your parents love you. God loves you more than you love your children. And I've heard that, and I fundamentally understand that, but I didn't, nobody can love my son or my sons or my daughter more than I can. And it's just, you just hear it like it's almost like a cliche, but it's a way that people are trying to show you the level of love. And so it's just to say, well, it's more than the love you can feel for your kids. And it's just something that everybody says. Then I had my experience, and I could not believe the level of love that I experienced. And I did not want to leave that energy. And it made me realize that no matter how hard I try, because I could feel it, I experienced it, that my new barometer is that I strive to be able to feel that level of intensity of love for my children as I felt in the presence of the Creator. Mm-hmm. And so it was a very humbling experience. But what I realized was that, there's been times on this planet where we have almost ended life as we know it with nuclear warfare. And there's been, at least from what I have read or what I have been told or what I have seen through the media, and again, this is not necessarily like the mainstream media, but just through conversations and such, through media like you and I put out from people that would be in the know. It's very interesting that at least 4 different times we were on the brink of nuclear warfare. Now, this is going back, probably 2019 back, I'd say by 2016, all the way back to the 1980s, the 4 occurrences that I'm aware of, where literally the silos opened up and missiles locked in, and the button was pushed, and the entire system was about to explode. The missiles were going to be launched, and then for some unexplained reason, everything got powered down. Just literally got powered down. Nobody could explain it. Nobody understood it because the launch codes had been fired in. So why did that happen? And there was an explanation given that this was interference from outside. Now, what's interesting is Dolores Cannon, I believe, is the name of the lady that she's now passed on, but she said that Star Trek was not fiction, there were many things about Star Trek that were meant to give us a message. And one of those was the directive, the prime directive, that you can't interfere. And so these other life forms have a prime directive that they cannot interfere with mankind, that we're here to learn, and they can't interfere. But what was interesting was there is one exception to that, and that is when mankind is about to create an event that would not just be catastrophic for this planet, but be catastrophic for other planets, other universes, other dimensions, whatever the case is. And I don't have an understanding well enough to speak on some of these other topics, but that whatever we would do would have a cascading effect on other beings and other dimensions and other planets. And that is the only time that they would intercede to prevent us from creating, a stupid action like destroying the world. And I also believe that the Earth itself is a pulsing, living being, and that we are part of that Mother Earth, similar to like our bodies are Earth, and the cells in our bodies make up the individual people. And this is why we're all connected. And when people talk about this, they sometimes can scientifically prove it using quantum physics, but many times people think it's just metaphysical nonsense, and it's not. That's why you can feel like you can be walking down the street, and it could be a dark street, and somebody approaches you, and something inside you tells you there's nothing to worry about, because there's nothing to worry about. And it's that because that energy is exchanged. Or you could be in a completely lit parking lot, and then somebody comes up or is walking towards you, and something tells you, something foreboding is warning you. Even though you're in a lit parking area, it's telling you this is dangerous. Why is it that we can feel that? Everybody can feel it. It's because why does a dog, or why does a cat, or why does any other animal come to one person and then shies away from another person? Because they're feeling that person's energy. They can sense good versus bad. And so I've long believed that. And I believe that on this planet right now, there's a crescendo occurring, almost like the tolerance of the creator, or perhaps the tolerance of those that are babysitting us. They're tired, and they're going to rectify the situation. And so I'm just kind of curious if this is accurate in your viewpoint.
I think it's absolutely bang on. And what you described just there is when God speaks to you. It's not a voice in your ear or hearing noises in your head. It's you described it beautifully. You can be in a lit parking lot and you just get that feeling, and that's God speaking to you. And when and when you're in a dark alley and you can't see whether, God again will speak to you, and he'll guide you, and he'll lead you in a pathway. And there are many times that we've been led in our lifetimes that you can't explain at the time. I look back at my life, the last 62 years, and there's a lot of things that I didn't understand at the time. Now I look back with complete gratitude that God put me on that path, that I didn't go the way that I was pushing to go. And that once you surrender to God, and that's not just giving up, that's knowing and understanding God. Once you learn to connect with God, then God will lead you. And it says in the Bible, ask and you will receive. And one classic case of that is 16 years ago, when I decided to ask God for a wife. And I gave him a shopping list. I told him exactly what I wanted. And as you said earlier, God's got a sense of humor. He came back and gave me everything I asked for and 50% more. But he made me wait 5 years because I wasn't ready. But God is very good and very gracious to each and every one of us. We need to learn to ask God. He doesn't always answer immediately, as you and I know. And God, for people who don't understand what we're talking about, God has an army of angels out there that are with us day by day, looking after us. Some people put names to them. Some people don't. Some people just have a feeling. But God has a myriad of angels out there looking after each and every one of us. And he knows, it says again in the Bible, he knows those that are his. He also knows those who've turned away. like Lucifer did, a fallen angel. And we just need to know who we are. I'm not going to force anybody, my opinion on anybody. Everybody has the right to choose. And I've often used the example, Rashid, of me overlooking the Mediterranean Sea here. My view, my perspective of the Mediterranean Sea is how I see it. But a diver has a completely different perception because he's 10 meters underneath. And his view is accurate, and so is mine, but they're different. And that's what we need to get to in life, to understand that we can have a different perspective and both be right, rather than saying, I don't agree with your view and I'm not going to talk to you. And that's what we've gone through for the last 3 years. If you don't agree with the government narrative, you get banned or what have you. We need to learn to listen to people who have a different perspective to us and see who we resonate with. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably the last 3 years you're talking about is probably reflective of the last few thousand years, because it's been basically the same nonsense, but just on a greater scale. Populations increase and greater scale of misinformation that's been tolerated and perpetuated for whatever hidden agendas they are. But this disclosure aspect that you were talking about, you know, the alien, what did you call it? The false alien invasion or whatever. Yeah, right. I mean, that hasn't occurred yet. And I think that if somebody were to say, okay, you know, if you were a betting man, how would you bet it? I would say that they would probably be beings that would reveal themselves, and that the government would, or the governments would, or whoever the leaders, the politicians would be in control at that time, would try to make people believe that they were here for negative, evil, nefarious purposes, whereas in fact, that would not be the case. That's what I think, just because of everything, you know, they've said. It's always been the opposite. I appreciate your openness, and, you know, and actually in all the religions of Abraham, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the lessons are the same, the characters are the same, the mottos are the same. But in all those monotheistic religions, and even in some of the non-monotheistic religions, which are all traditions, the concept that the Creator created us humans in His image is a common theme. And therefore, if we are images of the Creator, and the Creator is the ultimate creator, then therefore we, by definition, are creators ourselves. And that means that we have the ability to create the outcome that we want, which comes back to that message that kept on coming to me over and over again, which was that mankind needs to remember that and needs to exercise free will. And so free will is what? We can create anything that we want. It's simply by, as you said, ask and you shall receive, and that you have to be specific about it. And that resonation, that frequency of truth, you know, we need to live in that place, because that's when you can create. You can't create from a basis of fear and oppression and lies, because the frequency doesn't resonate at the right frequency to create. And so that's my world, and that's the world that I see that we're approaching rapidly. And like you said, Charlie, I can't wait till we get there.
I can't, but you just lit up a light inside me, because what you just said just now was my opening statement at the last Clay Clark event, is that God created us in His own image, which by default makes us creators. The only thing we're lacking is we need to become creative.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. We're not very creative.
We need to become creative, and we got all the tools there. We got everything. God has given us everything we need in life, everything. And in nature, we're learning now. You mentioned earlier the ayahuasca plant, the cannabis plant, all of these plants God gave us in nature. We now need to learn how to use them correctly and not abuse them. Because God gave us everything we needed.
Yeah, in fact, you know, talking about nature, you just brought this up, and this is something that I use with my TAP members. I try to explain how God is a God of abundance. In fact, there was a poem that my dad gave me a book when I was 14, and in the book there was a little poem, and the poem said, "I argued with life for a penny only to find dismayed that anything I would have asked of life would have paid. And the exercise that anybody can do is, just think about how abundant the world is. We live in a poverty-stricken mindset, but when you look at a tree, look at the number of leaves on a tree. You can't count the number of leaves on a tree, and then look at the number of trees that are on the planet. And you start seeing the extent of the level of God's abundance. Or you look at the blades of grass in a field, and then you count the number of fields on the planet, or you count the number of grains of sand on a beach, and then see how many beaches there are in the world. Well, these are all examples of nature showing us the level of abundance that the Creator has created for us. And so we just need to now open our eyes and create. Like you said, we need to become more creative. I couldn't agree more with that. So
yeah,
go ahead.
Go on.
No, I was just going to change subjects, but go ahead.
Go ahead, change subjects. That's fine.
Well, I was just going to talk about the conference that we have coming up. I hope that if your audience has an interest in the Advanced Medicine Conference. Advanced Medicine Conference is where all the leading medical minds from all over the world come together. This will be our 5th conference. We've had one every year since 2019. And even in 2020, which was our 2nd one, right in the middle of the pandemic, when no conference of any type anywhere took place in the United States from, I believe it was from February or March of 2020 till October of 2020, there was not a single conference that took place anywhere in the United States except for ours, which took place on Memorial Day weekend, as they all do. They always happen at the end of May. And even despite local government and the state government trying to shut down our event, we still had it. And it was a phenomenal event. And every year we've had it. So this year's event, the 5th annual Advanced Medicine Conference, is coming up in St. Louis, Missouri. That's where we're going to do it this year. It's May 27th, 28th, and 29th. And you can go to Advanced Medicine Conference. It's advanced with a D, Advanced Medical Conference. Sorry, Advanced Medicine Conference. I just said that wrong. AdvancedMedicineConference.com. And so people can get tickets there, but there's also a tab that says past medical or past events. And if you click on there, there's a digital access for the past years. And right now there's a massive discount on all those digital accesses for lifetime access. It includes the PDFs and audio downloads and videos, etc. And if people enter in Charlie, CHARLIE, as their discount code, they'll get a 10% discount on those tickets or on the digital access. In fact, if you go to the digital access and you use that code, then there's a way that you can actually do a bump up order, and you can actually get live tickets, and you get even a bigger discount there. So bundle them all up through the past events component.
What dates are they?
That people plan. I'm sorry?
What dates are they?
May 27th, 28th, and 29th. That's a Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So in the US, that Monday is a holiday. So it'll be half a day Monday.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing. Well, we'll put the link in down below, but this has been a dream come true for me today to be talking to you, because you were my inspiration at the start of this journey, a man that's stood up for the truth very early on. And it gave me the courage to continue my journey to bring me to where I am today. And I always look at people like you that are part of my foundation as the most valuable people on my journey, because you gave me the strength of character to stand up. Because it was never easy, but God didn't choose you and me for an easy journey. He chose us because he knew that we would stand up for what was right and continue to fight. But I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure. And I'd love to do it again as we go on this journey.
I would love to do that, Charlie, and thank you for those kind and generous words. Sometimes people have asked me, it must be hard, and I'll tell you, for me, I've never seen it as hard, because I made a pact with God 24 years ago, and that pact was with my son was vaccine injured. I said, just give me back my son and I'll never stop doing your work. And he gave me back my son. And,
wow.
It's not been hard for me at all. In fact, during that journey that I had when God talked with me, the one thing that, it's an emotional response, but the one thing that really, I've been really privileged that I've had a lot of people in my life, from my parents and teachers, and it's just different people saying they're proud of me. But I never did it for anyone else, and it was nice to hear, but it never really did anything for me. But the Creator told me that He was proud of me, and
yeah,
it was a very very emotional experience for me, that to know and to feel His presence and His unconditional love and how expansive it was. And I asked the Creator for help. I said, there's so many people that need help. What can we do to help? What can I do to help? Tell me what needs to be done to help. I'll do whatever it takes to help. Just tell me what to do. And Charlie, from that point till the next hour and 5 minutes, all you hear is me saying, "Oh God, oh my God, oh my God, I see you, God." The reason was because there were images. I don't even remember the vast majority of them, but there were images that were flashed, and they showed the expanse and the power of the Creator. And each image that would come subsequently would show exponentially the greater power. And it was just more and more and more. And I couldn't believe it. It was like recognizing that the side that we're opposing, literally, if God chose like that, it would be done. But it's because of the exercising of free will. That's what the Creator wants us in His image to create our outcome. So we have all the power, and that's what I saw. And it was incredible. I'm sure that some people out there thinking that, Dr. Buttar's lost his mind, and that's fine. I'm completely fine with being labeled that way as a conspiracy theorist or somebody's lost their mind. But I appreciate your kind words, and I would love to do this again. And for the people that want to get more medical knowledge, the Advanced Medicine Conference is literally the place where you're going to get it all.
God is not only proud of you, He's very grateful for what you've done. I can tell you that. He's very grateful for what you've done.
I appreciate you saying that, Charlie. We're blessed to be in the position of being of service, and any way we can do that, I want to be able to do that. And I thank you for leading the charge and bringing so many people's awareness. I got land blasted, and basically all my social media was annihilated. But now I think that there are venues out there that more and more people can voice their opinions. So you've done a fantastic job of growing through that adversity, and I look forward to doing this with you again.
Perfect. Look forward to seeing you again, Rashid.
Thank you so much, Charlie.
Noble Gold. Real assets. Real value. Your wealth protected.